Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce you all to Leah Kuypers. Leah is the creator of the Zones of Regulation, a framework designed to foster regulation. And I'd also like to introduce you to Aruna Dial. Aruna, as many of you know, serves on the board of AMI UK and is the owner of Appledore Montessori in Lancaster. I'm going to start with you, Leah. Tell us a bit about yourself, please.
Well, thank you for the invitation to be with you and your audience. It's an honor. I'm Leah Kuypers. I am an occupational therapist and educator by trade. And it was through my work in the schools and seeing so many kids struggling with being able to manage their feelings, their energy, those big emotions, and often being penalized for their challenges in that area, that I really put my mind to trying to create a better way to support them in learning that self-awareness of how they're feeling and communicating it, and also support the adults around them so that there was more of a positive climate in the schools, so that the teachers felt that they had the skills and the tools to help truly teach these kids these skills, and create a better learning space for everyone. So that's where the zones of regulation kind of came from. And that's been really now my life's work for the last nearly 20 years.
Great. It's fascinating. From what I've read about it, I can see many places that it aligns with Montessori pedagogy and practice. Um, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Aruna, tell us a bit about yourself and how you're using the zones of regulation.
Sure. So yes, Diana said I run a small nursery in the north of the UK in Lancaster, and we came across your work after looking at different ways to support children's behaviour and emotional development in the early years. So I think especially since the pandemic, and also the way of life seems to be getting faster and a little bit more stressful. I feel like children are growing up in rather stressful environments compared to years ago. And
Yeah.
it definitely feels like in the classroom they need a lot more support in that area. And until they're in a regulated state, it feels like they can't learn, maths and letters and things like that. So yeah, it's been really interesting finding your work and introducing it in the classroom. Children have been very drawn to it, I have to say, since the very beginning, and it's just fits in really well in a Montessori classroom where children are. We have the different age groups, so everyone is at a different level already, and they cooperate and collaborate, and this has fit in very nicely to be able to, if a child is struggling with their emotions, another one will guide them towards the zones of regulation area of the classroom, and help them find a way to settle. So
I
yeah,
love
sorry,
that.
getting ahead of myself here. It'd be greatly if you could tell us, for those who haven't heard of the zones of regulation before, maybe to explain a little bit what it means and how it looks in the classroom.
Absolutely. So uh, the zones of regulation is really a way of thinking. It's a framework that uses four colors to help us categorize all the different ways we're feeling and those energy level, those states of alertness. Uh, so the blue zone is the lower levels of energy, sad, sick, tired, bored. The green zone is a more calm state of energy, a organized nervous system. So we might put emotions like happy, content, proud, feeling okay, and focused in the green zone. The yellow zone is when we have a little bit more energy, our feelings start to get a little bit stronger. But we still have some of this cognitive control, those executive functions we can tap into a little easier in the yellow. So that is feeling excited, feeling maybe kind of goofy, feeling frustrated, worried. But if those feelings continue to strengthen, then the red zone is where we categorize those really powerful emotions, that really strong energy that can give us a sense of being less in control, to that might be kind of overwhelming us. So we put positive emotions there, like elated, ecstatic. Maybe, your team wins the championship, or get some really good news that you're jumping up and down for joy. But also we think about being, really angry in the red zone, devastated, panicked. So with this colored system, it gives us an easy way to think about, to communicate around our feelings. And then with that awareness, we can start categorizing our tools to support regulating each of the 4 zones. Because how we regulate that blue zone when we have those down feelings and low energy is a lot different than how we would regulate our red zone when our feelings are really strong and need a very powerful tool to help us manage them. One of the key principles of the zones of regulation is that all our feelings are okay, that we welcome all the feelings that we have, and we think about if we need to regulate it so it works well for us in the situation we're in. So there's no good or bad feelings, there's no good or bad zone. It's just thinking about, maybe I need to regulate my yellow zone differently in the classroom than I do when I'm out playing outside for recess.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's it can be very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the green zone is the goal and where we want to be, because it's a more relaxed and happy state. And I love that you say you do put some positives in the red zone, so that it's not just seen as, oh, it's only angry when we feel, because we can have very strong emotions that are positive, can't we?
Yeah, and sometimes we need to regulate those very positive emotions too. And another thing is, we don't always need to regulate our zone. Sometimes it's working well for us. As long as we're meeting our goals, we're able to complete our tasks in front of us, we have a sense of well-being. Sometimes, that expressions of joy or expressions of anger are helping us, and other times, or like in the red zone, maybe you're running from danger. You don't want to regulate that. But so the real premise is that we have tools available to support us when we do feel that we need to regulate our zone, so that we can ultimately achieve that sense of wellness and meet our goals that are in front of us. So one of the things that you said, Aruna, that you touched on was how the kids are helping each other with that regulation as well. And that's what I find is a very cool aspect of the zones, is we're helping to build the self-awareness of how we're feeling and what tools work for us, but in giving a common language and visuals that support all of our learners and teachers and caregivers. There's a lot of co-regulation that happens within this, and developmentally, that co-regulation is a stepping stone to being able to self-regulate. So when the zones is implemented in a setting, such as a preschool, a home, or classroom, what we tend to find is the zone's climate grows too, that we're supporting each other. We, can notice our neighbor, our friend next to us, and have that easy way to help support them with the zones, checking in with them, helping them find tools to support them.
I think it's fantastic, because we, I think that there's a lot more talk about emotional intelligence in development in childhood these days than, for example, when I was a child. I don't remember having a curriculum like this when I was in school. So it feels like by teaching the children these things, we're actually also teaching the adults around them, both in the classroom and at home. And would you say that you've had some feedback about how the zones of regulation have helped beyond the classroom?
Absolutely. I hear from parents, from teachers all the time that they're like, I think in the zones, I use the zones, which is, really there's that adult social emotional learning that is so important to help our then children build this skill set. And so that is something that I really firmly believe in, is giving the adults the support team, the tools, the strategies, the knowledge to then make themselves more successful in supporting the kids. And so that does start with having that own regulation as adults. And, I've yet to meet an adult who is this, able to regulate all the feelings, all the situations, that they come across. We all struggle as human beings. It's human nature that we have emotional experiences, and that we're still working to grow our toolbox and reflect on our experiences to better ourselves for stressors to come. So I do find that the zones is something that resonates often with the adults, and giving them the tools and strategies, I think, is really important to then more fully support the youth.
Leah, I noticed on your website the actual packaging, if you like, for the zones of regulation comes in many forms. You've got a digital curriculum, you've got the framework, you've got apps, you've got an advanced pack. how what does it actually look like for those of us who have never used it?
Well, so like I said, I've been at this for nearly 20 years. So, we've continued to evolve the zones and support teaching it in various formats and mediums. The Zones of Regulation digital curriculum was something we just released this summer. This is essentially the second edition to the original curriculum book that was first published in 2011. So this digital curriculum is all the updated theories, the integration of best practices that have evolved over the last decade, in addition to the best of the original curriculum that we wanted to continue into the next generation of zones. So we really worked hard to integrate in more ways to differentiate it for different age groups, different learners in their development of regulation, so that there's resources accessible for, say, your 4 or 5-year-old. There's resources accessible for high school age or secondary age learner, or and in between. We wanted to make it a lot easier for teachers to teach and more engaging for the learners to access. So digitally gave us a lot more opportunity to create different learning mediums. So there's fun interactives, there's game activities that the teacher sets up, but they're accessing it. The adult is accessing those lessons, those learning activities, the handouts, all through a digital login. So it's not necessarily that the kid is in front of a screen, it's actually adult facilitated and it's accessed digitally, if that makes sense, by the adult. So then that is what I would really say is where you get the core teaching content, you get the interactives for the learner to engage in. And then we have companion products. So for example, there's the Zones of Regulation storybook set called The Road to Regulation and The Regulation Station, which is really geared towards our younger learners. And that is really meant to be used in conjunction with the curriculum itself. Same with, we have tools to try cards for kids, which are different regulation strategies. Those are really meant to align with the teaching in the curriculum. So what I have found is that sometimes people think they're doing the zones where they might put 4 colors up on the wall, talk about a couple emotions, and then don't really dig into the content of the lessons, the zones curriculum. And regulation is a developmental skill, just like learning to communicate and learning to walk. And so with that, development needs exposure, needs support, and there's teaching in each of these lessons to really help your learners build this foundational competency of regulation. And that is why I direct people foremost to the digital curriculum, because that's going to give you the sequence of lessons and concepts to help your learners move through that developmental sequence of learning to regulate. And so everything else is just kind of for fun besides, or for fun, for extensions to supplement, but not to replace that digital curriculum.
So what does it look like in your setting then, Aruna?
Well,
How are you using?
I'll admit we don't use the full curriculum at the moment so far, but what we do have is a poster with the different color, the different zones, and below it has a few different strategies that you can use. And then we've got some cards, like you say, Leah, where you can, each card has a different exercise that you can do if you're feeling like you need to regulate. So for example, breathing exercises or humming, and yeah, different tools that they can use. We've added a few of our own, like that we have a Tibetan singing bowl, which the children will just sit in a corner with the singing bowl, and it makes quite a nice vibration. So that seems to help them regulate, and also anyone else who's nearby and can hear it. And then
They sound like they'd be a really great addition to a peace corner in a in a Montessori classroom.
Yeah. So we've basically put it in our the relaxing area, yeah, like you say, the peace corner, also near the library. So it's just, if anyone's feeling like they need a bit of space or they need to relax, then that's it, where they go. And then we'll do group activities normally on a daily basis and just check what color they're feeling.
So do you find that they work quite well with the early years, even children who are kind of pre-verbal, if you like?
Yeah, I'd love to know that from Leah, actually, because we've used it in the sort of 3 to 6 classroom so far, but we'd love to introduce it to the toddler rooms as well. So I don't know whether there's any way of adapting it to that stage.
Yeah, well, I generally say, 4 is where I find 4 years of age, that is a entry point for a majority of learners who are developing along the continuum within kind of the range of typical development. That's not to say learners younger can't pick it up. My son, I think, was 2 when he just had exposure in the home and I wasn't directly teaching him, and he started talking in the zones, saying one night he said, "I'm in the blue one," and it went completely over my head, and my husband's like, "I think he's talking about the zones." And then my son goes, "Yeah, I'm sad." So as a 2-year-old, he was able to use the zones to help express himself and co-regulate with us. My daughter, at about her 3rd birthday, she would say, "I'm in the flower zone." It was whatever shirt she was wearing. So she is also fiercely stubborn. So I don't know, that might have been part of it too. She, but with that, there is ideas for adaptation. They're developmentally, their brain is not accessing this metacognition yet. That doesn't come in until fours, fives, sixes, and we're still developing our metacognition as adults. And so that phase of regulation development where we're using metacognitive thinking-based strategies, like maybe self-talk and telling ourselves, it's going to be okay. That isn't developmentally typical for a 2, 3, 4-year-old, or fours are just starting to see some emergence of that self-talk. But they are emerging with language strategies. That is that developmental stage that they're in, is using more language-based strategies to support their regulation. And so the zones gives a really nice bridge to those language strategies, because now you have colors and you can non-verbally communicate. You can pick up and hand someone a color zone you're feeling, or point to something on the wall. Maybe you can't find the emotional word of saying like, oh, I'm frustrated, right? That's a pretty big word, but you can tell that I'm in the yellow. And so it gives a nice bridge. And I do want to say that we do spend a lot of time building emotional awareness and being able to name our emotions, but the zones gives us these nice categories to think about it, and eases that communication and creates that bridge to move from more behavior-based strategies of maybe running away, hitting, covering our ears or shutting down, to language strategies. I'm in the red. I'm in the blue. My son telling me I'm in the blue. He needed a hug. And that was his way to tell us. So having those visual supports, that common language, certainly helps these kids develop this awareness that will, with time, develop into more metacognition of, yep, I'm in the red. I need to keep my body safe. I know my deep breathing tool helps. I know the peace spot is a good tool for me in this moment. And, that's farther down that developmental continuum. And some of your learners you might see doing that within those early childhood years. I just wouldn't want anyone to expect that they're going to be able to self-regulate, because that's not even developmentally the norm yet at that age.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're describing a way that teachers, guides can make emotions concrete, if you like, so that young children can handle them and explore them and discover them the way they would anything else in the classroom.
Yeah, and there's a lot of co-regulation that, Arun, as you were talking about, you can, as the teacher, make a fairly educated guess that maybe this kid is in the yellow zone, looking at their physiological signs. And that is an opening for you then to support the co-regulation of these learners. Hey, let's check in with the zones. Can you show me where you're feeling? How about we take a walk? Or how about and you can guide them to a tool, support strategy that's going to help co-regulate. And then maybe reflecting afterwards, wow, I notice your body looks really relaxed now. How did that tool help you? So that they're building that awareness, understanding how these different strategies affect them, and that can then help facilitate their more independent regulation down the road.
How would you say, Leah, that what signs should teachers look out for to, sort of help the child when they're more in the yellow zone before they reach the red, especially in the early years?
Yeah, they might be more sometimes withdrawn, not talking, head down, or shoulders slumped over, and that may, sometimes that can be associated with more blue zone, tired, but sometimes that's what stress, overwhelm, worry looks like for a lot of kids too. Covering their ears certainly is an indication, hanging out around the peripheral of the group instead of immersed in the middle. It might be less eye contact. It might be just more tense in their muscles, their jaw, their hands, shoulders. It can be their voice volume getting a little louder, or their rate of speech a little faster. Their eyes may be a little more wide open. So, what we also try to do with the learners is help bring awareness of what those signs and signals are for them. And especially at those early years, it is a lot of working with them. Oh, can I share what I see? I notice, when you're in the yellow, your body gets really tight. It might feel like your heart is beating really fast. And so part of the curriculum is really helping these learners identify what that zone feels like within them too. So that could be a joint exploration activity that you're doing to help both you.
You've mentioned that you've developed a new curriculum that's come out this summer. Would you share with us what's like the main update, or something that you're particularly excited to have included this time around?
We have started by teaching what is regulation and just defining this big word for the learners, and the learning culminates in the zones of regulation pathway, which is a sequence of 5 steps to support them in regulating real time, so that it's something that through working through the curriculum, they've had exposure to each of these steps, and now they have a very concrete way to approach a situation and determine how they need and if they need to regulate in that situation. So we built, step 1 is notice what's around us, that situational awareness. Step 2, check in with our zone. So we're noticing our body, we pause and we notice our body signals, we name our emotion and zone. Step 3, we decide, do we need to regulate? What's going to work well for me here? Sometimes it's yes. And then, if say we check in the blue zone, we would say, yep, I'm maybe tired in the blue zone and I'm trying to learn in the classroom. I need a blue zone tool to help me care for my blue zone. So maybe it's doing some jumping jacks. They would then reference their blue zone toolbox. What's my blue zone tools? Maybe it's jumping jacks. Maybe it's getting a drink of water. And then the last step is reflection. Is this working for me? And sometimes we say, oh, maybe we need another tool. Let's revisit the pathway. And sometimes we say, wow, Thomas, I love how you took care of your zone and you're learning and listening. I'm so proud of you, or whatever it might be. And so it's really to help bring the learners into this fold of developing that awareness and that agency of how to manage themselves, giving them options, and giving them the climate and the opportunities to use those tools and strategies to support their regulation so that they can thrive and have that sense of well-being. And also hopefully with that common language, with those supports in the classroom, you're able to focus on teaching and not having to do so much classroom management and behavior management, because we're bringing kids into this and they're building those skill sets out. And we're giving them the tools and the structure to facilitate that happening.
Yes, and eventually manage their own behavior, which is what we're always striving for, isn't it? We don't want to be this external force that's constantly policing them, do we?
Right. And that's, I think what has been my experience is that, we're just often, it's a punitive,
Yeah.
consequence applied over and over. And those discipline strategies aren't building the skill set. They're just, really depleting the self-esteem, the confidence of that child. And it's frustrating for the adult because it's not working.
Mm.
So I really wanted to change this equation around and give the tools to the leaders to facilitate the growth and development of this within the learners.
It's interesting, I think, as well, because our pedagogy is based on observation and self-reflection, really. And I don't think you could, hope to use the zones of regulation in your classroom without first thinking, oh my goodness, have I tapped into my own feelings today?
Right. And that's really, Diana, part of the modeling that we ask is that the adults are really on this growth with the learners. So like Aruna, you might say, oh, as we check in the zones, I'm feeling tired in the blue zone. I, am sick and just not feeling 100% today. So you're in this journey with them, and I find that really creates more of this equilibrium. We're not the adults with all the knowledge trying to bestow it on the children. Rather, we're really being emotionally available and growing
Mm.
with them. And it feels more like a partnership, I find. It feels more like this trust, this rapport is developed out of that, so that it's something that I feel then the kids are more vulnerable. They're more willing to talk about their feelings because you're not actually just fine. The kids see us as only in the green zone often, which isn't the case, if you're anything like me. But we regulate all those internal feelings that we're experiencing. And so that's where if you're more transparent and sharing, oh, the noise in here is making me feel overwhelmed in the yellow, I need to take a couple deep breaths to take care of my zone. And you're just modeling this climate that regulation is the norm and not the exception. We're all working to regulate. And like you said, there's lots of tools all around us and within us. So we give a little bit of, lots of tool ideas, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many tools that support our regulation. Like I'm drinking my coffee yet this morning. That's a regulation tool for me. And so we really, really broaden this idea of regulating for well-being and thinking about what do I need to have a sense of well-being right now, and to support my regulation. And there's lots of strategies that we can and integrate into this framework to support us with that.
I think that's really important what you said then, Leah, about us adults also recognizing when we're in the different zones and using the strategies ourselves in front of the children, because I think in traditional schooling it can feel very much like the teacher is on a different level and from the children, and we're in this position of authority. But what you're saying is to very much be learning alongside them, and I think a lot of children can really relate to that easier than if we're sort of imposing this idea for them and making it like it's a tool that they have to use, but we're
right
above it.
And I will tell you, they love helping you regulate. Oh, Miss Leah, you need to go get a cup of coffee. Miss Leah, you should take a deep breath. Like they want to help you, and that empowers them to have this command, like it's they want to co-regulate you just like we want to co-regulate them. So I find it creates this really beautiful climate where Like I said, regulation is the norm, not the exception. And that's a much more inclusive environment than too for all these learners who come to this with different entry points of skills. And some have had very little exposure and support before they get into their, into a preschool like setting. Some just developmentally aren't wired to build the skill set the same way as their peers. And so when we're putting intention around this, when we're creating a place where we're all working on this, it creates a more inclusive environment for those who may be divergent in their abilities around regulation.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about neurodiversity or special needs, educational needs, but was that what inspired you to create this work? I believe you mentioned it on your website.
Yeah, I as an occupational therapist working in the schools, and I also was working as an autism resource specialist. And so everyone on my caseload was identified with either a disability or had an educational label. So neurodivergent in one way or another. And that for me, I saw that regulation was what was the most inhibiting of them to participate in peer related activities. It was what was keeping them out of the classroom and causing more seclusion, restraints, disciplinary actions, and so like you mentioned earlier, there's all these academic skills, but when they can't regulate, those are nearly impossible to get to. And that's what I was finding is this was at the foundation of them being able to access everything else in life. And I had little early childhood and kindergartners. And then I had high school, secondary age kids, 17, 18, 19 years old, who didn't have these skills and were some of them going in and out of juvenile services. And it kept me up at night thinking about what kind of future they had. They had enough math skills, reading abilities, to hold a job, but there was no way that they were going to be able to participate in our society and our communities without the regulation skills. And so, they were getting tapped on the shoulder by a classroom aide to go take a regulation break. And they're not going to have that luxury on a work site. Their employer's not going to say, oh, you need to calm down and take a break. They're going to lose that job. Those relationships are going to be really strained for them as they get into adulthood. So I felt like we were failing these kids. So it was really thinking about these high school kids. What's a really easy system that they can self-monitor? 4 colors to capture how they're feeling. They can then monitor where they're at. We can build tools to support each of these 4 zones. And it worked for them. It also worked for my younger kids too, because it was easy enough for them to come in with varying entry points of experience and cognition. So that was kind of how my baby was born.
Have you heard from your from those children since, Leah? The ones that your first guinea pigs, so to say?
Yeah, not the original ones, but there's one that I've maintained. There's a few I've maintained relationships with, and this one, let's just call him W. He was a kid who I started working with in early childhood. And he was spending a lot of time under the tables in the hallways. He had a full-time aide assigned to him, and now he's living independently in college. and in his second year. So that is huge gains from being, in special ed and needing a lot of resources to support him. By second grade, we had completely faded his aid support, and he was able to say what zone he was in, what tools he needed. And so he wasn't reliant on the aid being that co-regulator for him. And his teacher said he has different tools than other kids in the classroom, but he knows how to use them in the same way and help himself to what he needs. I'm not needing to give him any more support than anyone else. So that was a success story that I can say I followed through into, now in college, and it blows my mind. So incredibly proud of him.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, it definitely starts with awareness, doesn't it? You can't take action unless you're aware.
Yeah, exactly. And that's hard, especially for kids who too might come to us from trauma and have varying degrees of modeling that's been exposure in their home life. And best practices try to work with caregivers and give this language, the supports that's to them so that they can also use this in their home. But I know that's not always the case. And so we have this time with them in our setting, and I've seen incredible gains for kids too who don't have that carryover, but just having that opportunity to learn and grow and practice this in a safe environment, such as a school, a classroom, still really make some significant gains.
Yes, it's interesting that you mentioned trauma, because that trauma-informed care education is high on people's agenda at the moment. And even thinking about how some children may have been impacted by the lockdowns. It's a form of trauma, because it's for some it's something that happened to them, but they haven't been able to process. And so being able to recognize our responses and be able to move through our responses, because once it's happened, there's nothing we can do about it. It's how we react to what's happened, isn't it? So our response is the key to how we overcome difficulties. And I found it fascinating from that point of view. Have you how long have you been using it, Aruna, in your setting?
We started last April, so less than a year. But I have to say it's already had a big impact in the classroom. Some of the children have moved on to the next level, so which it's a shame, because they became they became the masters of it, and but yeah, I'd say it's been really helpful just having a daily gathering, sitting together and just recognizing where we're at. And like you mentioned your son saying the flowers, sorry, your daughter mentioning that she was in the flower zone. We've got definitely a few children around 2 and 3 who will say, "Oh yes, I'm blue," because they've got a blue t-shirt on. But despite that, I'd say that it has helped children who may be on the spectrum, or those who are just like coming out of the pandemic. They've struggled more with regulating their emotions. It's really helped them to just have an area of the classroom where they can find their way, work their way through it, and know that they've got those tools there and the visual aids to help them.
Where would you, for someone, a setting that's a complete beginner at this, where would you recommend them starting? Because you've got lots of lots of products. Yeah. Where would you recommend someone's, a school started with?
I think they could do a training with us if they wanted to just learn a little bit more. A basic half-day training might be a good option. They could request a sampler lesson from the new digital curriculum to take a look at it and see how one of the concepts within the curriculum is laid out, to see if they think it would be a good fit for them. There's apps that are just a really easy access point to get an understanding of kind of the whole framework, and those are meant for kids to interface with. So I'd say about 4 and up for apps with an adult working through the content with them. And that we get a caregiver involved too, to learn about the zones. But if you're looking at a preschool implementation, I think coming to one of our basic trainings or requesting a sampler of one of the concepts would be, either one would be a good entry place. And our website, as you said, has lots of information just generally about the zones too. Yes, we have different resources there, but we have just a lot of information, so you can read more just about what this is and
Thank you.
if it might be a fit.
That's wonderful. And with that, I want to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today, your knowledge, your discoveries. And thank you, Aruna, as well, for sharing your experience with us today. And I think we've run out of time.
Well, this was an honor. I appreciate this conversation. It was really fun and engaging. And I was just going to say, the website is zonesofregulation.com, if that can lead you to any of those resources, and hopefully not overwhelm you too much.
Yes, well, if we follow the zones, we know how to deal with the overwhelm too.
Yes, just regulate that yellow zone with a deep breath. Tell yourself one step ahead of the other. I
think from the sounds of it, that chart ought to be up on everybody's kitchen wall, really.
It is in my kitchen. You better believe it. I got 2 middle school students, so yeah. Regulation is looking a little different in middle school than it did when they were younger, but still need our tools.
Right.
Well, thank you.
And thank you so much. And thank you, Aruna, for being with us today. I know you're not 100% well.
Sorry if I babbled a bit. It was wonderful to have the chance to speak to you, Leah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you both. Bye-bye.